Sacred threads, a journey through the world's religions. Before temples rose or scriptures sang, before names like Yahweh, Buddha, or Allah echoed through history, humanity looked up at the stars and asked, "Why are we here?" Sacred Threads is a sweeping 15-part audio odyssey into the heart of our deepest yearnings, for meaning, for order, for the divine. From the silent meditations of Jain monks to the cosmic battles of Zoroastrian myth, from the fire of Sinai to the path beneath the Bodhi tree, this series traces the origins, stories, and living truths of the world's great religions and the new ones still being born. You'll walk with prophets, philosophers, and skeptics. You'll witness the rise of sacred texts and hear the whispered doubts of those who walked away. And through it all, you'll discover not just what others believe, but what belief itself reveals about us. Whether you're faithful, skeptical, or just curious, this is more than a history of religions. It's a mirror, and the question it reflects is eternal. What do you worship when the world falls silent?
The dawn of religion.
Episode 9, The Way Without Forcing, Daoism. Narrator's Prelude. Mist braids the shoulders of a pine. A stream threads itself around a rock rather than break it. Somewhere a farmer straightens from his field and listens. The wind sifts through bamboo, and in that whisper he hears more policy than any edict, more wisdom than any library. "Dao," he says softly, "the way." It doesn't shout, it doesn't shove, it moves like water and wears mountains down. Welcome to Episode 9 of the World's Religions. Tonight we enter Daoism, or Taoism, depending on the Romanization you prefer. We will meet a tradition with two intertwined faces. A philosophical face that counsels humility, naturalness, and wu-wei, acting without forcing. A religious face that celebrates gods, rites, talismans, healing, meditation, and monastic lineages reaching from sacred mountains to city lanes. Scholars sometimes distinguish Daojia, Taoist thought, from Daojiao, Taoist religion, but on the ground, the two braid together like roots under a mossed stone. Part 1 brings us from the Warring States cauldron into the Laozi and Zhuangzi, the rise of Huanglao statecraft, and the early communities that seeded religious Taoism. We'll walk slowly because Taoism prefers unhurried seeing. 1. The age that needed a way, China before Taoism. 1.1 Zhou order unravels. For centuries, the Zhou kings ruled by ritual and kinship. As central power frayed, dukes fought dukes and ministers ate ministers. The spring and autumn era slid into the warring states, 5th to 3rd centuries BCE. 7 great states, Qin, Chu, Qi, Yan, Han, Zhao, Wei, sparred with iron, chariots, and clever texts. Out of crisis bloomed the 100 schools. Confucians argued for moral cultivation and ritual propriety. Mohists campaigned for universal love and frugal states. Legalists engineered strict laws and harsh penalties. Naturalists mapped yin-yang rhythms and the 5 phases: wood, fire, earth, metal, water. Taoists whispered a different proposal: stop thrashing, attend to how things already flow. 1.2. A different kind of instruction. Where other schools codified rules, early Taoists offered images and paradox: water, valley, uncarved wood, the wheel's usefulness in its empty hub. They distrusted verbal certainty. "The Tao that can be spoken is not the constant Tao," begins one text, both a warning and an invitation. 2. The Laozi Daodejing, a short book with deep currents, 2.1 Text, Author, and Name. The Laozi, also called Daodejing, Classic of the Way and Its Power, is among the world's most translated books. Tradition attributes it to Laozi, Old Master, a semi-mythic archivist who, tired of corruption, rode west on a water buffalo and, stopped by a border guard, penned a slim volume before vanishing. Whether he was a single person or a composite voice, the text itself likely coalesced over time from pre-Qin sayings. Early manuscript finds, Guodian bamboo slips circa 4th century BCE and Mawangdui silk texts buried 2nd century BCE confirm that Laozi-like materials circulated before China unified under Qin and that the chapters' order and wording varied. The book's brevity, about 5,000 characters, masks a depth that continues to sprout commentary. 2.2 Themes that teach by turning you around.
Dao-wei, not a road laid by humans, but the generative pattern lurking in things. It is prior to names, mother of the 10,000 beings, inexhaustible and without favorites.
De, power, virtue, not moralism, but potency, the quiet authority of something fully itself. Wu-wei, non-forcing, not passivity, but effortless efficacy, like a skilled archer who has become the bow or water that attains its end by not contending. Ziran, self-so, naturalness, the spontaneity of a thing in its own pattern. Pu, uncarved block, original simplicity. Once carved by concept and ambition, we lose the grain. Soft overcomes hard. Water hollows stone. Infants are supple and thus full of life. The rigid breaks. 3 treasures: compassion, frugality, and not daring to be first under heaven. Taoist leadership starts by refusing to preen. 2.3a Politics of Humility. The Laozi addresses rulers as often as mystics. Paradoxically, it advises governing by not over-governing. When rulers meddle, people contend. When rulers restrain appetite and reduce cleverness, corruption withers. When rulers stop self-display, people settle. This is not an argument for neglect, but for light touch, a trust in feedback and flow instead of control by decree. 3. The Zhuangzi, wild, funny, and profound. If the Laozi is a river stone, small, cool, gnomic, the Zhuangzi is a mountain riddled with trails, stories, jokes, dialogues, and shimmering parables stitched across 33 chapters, the inner 7 likely closest to Zhuangzi himself, the outer and mixed accreting later voices. The book plays, and in play it pierces. 3.1 Butterflies, Butchers, and Useless Trees. Butterfly dream. Zhuangzi dreams he is a butterfly. Waking, he wonders, was Zhuangzi dreaming the butterfly, or is a butterfly now dreaming Zhuangzi? The point is not relativism for its own sake, but a loosening of fixed identity. Cook Ding. A butcher carves an ox so seamlessly his blade never meets resistance. He follows heaven's patterns in the joints. His knife stays sharp for years. The story embodies wu-wei, mastery as attunement. Useless tree, twisted and gnarled, it is spared the carpenter's axe. Everyone knows the use of the useful, Zhuangzi smiles, but who knows the use of the useless? Uselessness becomes shelter, shade, life. 3.2 Fasting of the mind, sitting and forgetting. 2 practices flicker into view. Jinzhai, fasting the heart-mind, emptying preconception so one hears through the whole body. Zuowang, sitting and forgetting, dropping knowledge, rituals, even self until one merges with the way. These are proto-meditations, later elaborated in religious Daoism. 3.3 Language with a wink. Zhuangzi treats language like a dragonfly. Hold too tight, and it breaks. He invites perspectival humility, what he calls the equalization of things. None of this denies differences. It refuses to weaponize them. His laughter disarms certainty, and thus, quietly, violence. 4. Beyond two books, Liezi, Huang Lao, and the Naturalist Thread. 4.1. The Liezi and Wandering Tales. The Liezi, edited in its present form around the 3rd to 4th century CE, contains some of Chinese philosophy's most charming stories, like the man who feared his shadow and ran himself to death. Whether or not it preserves an ancient master named Li Yuku, it transmits a Taoist sensibility, thrift, ease, and freedom from fear. 4.2. Huang Lao, Rulership by the Way. Early Western Han emperors and counselors cherished a syncretism known as Huang Lao, blending the Yellow Emperor, a culture hero associated with medicine, cosmology, and statecraft, and Laozi's non-forcing governance. Under Emperors Wen and Jing, 2nd century BCE, the court prized light taxes, modest punishments, and restraint, policies later remembered as a time when the people were left to breathe. When Emperor Wu turned toward activist Confucian state doctrine, Huang Lao receded at court, but its ethos seeped into medicine, astronomy, and ritual. 4.3. Yin-Yang and 5 Phases. Strictly speaking, yin-yang theory and the 5 phases arose in the naturalist school, not Daoism as a sect. But Taoists harvested these models. Yin, receptive, dark, moist, and yang, active, bright, dry, co-generate. Neither is evil, both are needed. 5 phases, wood, fire, earth, metal, water, cycle through production and control sequences, furnishing a grammar for medicine, music, statecraft, feng shui, and calendar. Taoism's genius is to absorb and metabolize such patterns, not to ossify them. 5. Words into worlds, from thought to religion. 5.1. The Celestial Masters, a community with registers. Around the 2nd century CE, in the Sichuan uplands, a figure named Zhang Daoling experiences a revelation from Lord Lao, Laozi deified as Taishang Lao Jun. He founds the movement later called the Way of the Celestial Masters, Tianxi Dao, sometimes nicknamed the 5 Pecks of Rice community, after a suggested donation for new adherents. Features registers. Elu. Initiates are inscribed into celestial rosters, linking humans to protective spirits. Healing and confession. Illness is read as disrupted qi and moral imbalance. Confession and ritual restore harmony. Parish structure. Communities organized with local libationers overseeing ethics, marriages, funerals. Diet and discipline. Moderation in alcohol and sex. Avoidance of grain during certain fasts. Bigyu, cultivation of breath. This was religion as social fabric, not only ideas or solitary meditation, but villages knit by rites and ledgers. 5.2. Yellow Turbans and Great Peace. Near the same period, northern China witnessed the Yellow Turban Uprising, 184 CE, inspired by healers of the Way of Great Peace, Taiping Dao. Though distinct from the Celestial Masters, they drew from similar healing ritual currents and tapped popular frustration with corrupt officials and disaster. The rebellion failed, but it signaled that Taoist-colored hopes had mass traction. 5.3. From Persecution to Patronage. As dynasties rose and fell, Taoist movements found patrons and endured purges, yet each century added layers. The Jin and early medieval periods, 4th to 5th century, saw revelations on Mount Maoshan and elsewhere, enriching liturgy and cosmology. By Tang times, 7th to 10th century, Taoism shared the cultural stage with Buddhism and Confucian statecraft. Emperors would alternately favor and curb each as politics required. We will reach those later. For now, 2 revelation lineages deserve a closer look. 6. Shangqing and Lingbao. Heaven opens its library. 6.1. Shangqing. highest clarity. In the 4th century, texts known as Shangqing were revealed in spirit visions associated with Wei Huakun and recorded by Yang Shi for the aristocratic Shu family. The revelations outlined a dazzling inner cosmos, gods residing in organs, palaces within the body, visualization and ascent practices, refining Jing Qi Shen, essence, breath, spirit, to commune with perfected beings. A preference for meditative elixirs over crude external alchemy. Shangqing offered a literary mysticism, lyric, aristocratic, and profoundly interior. 6.2 Lingbao, Numinous Treasure. Soon after, Lingbao scriptures emerged, 4th to 5th century, interlacing Taoist cosmology with ritual patterns that echoed Buddhist liturgy. Universal salvation rituals, merit transfer, and concern for all souls, including the unquiet dead. Talismans, few, and incantations, standardized. Priests wielded thunder and lamp in carefully choreographed jiao offerings for community renewal. A cosmic bureaucracy of heavens, offices, registers. These lineages did not replace Laozi and Zhuangzi. They extended them into ceremony, community care, and mythic imagination. 6.3 The Pantheon takes shape. Across medieval centuries, the Taoist pantheon crystallized, fluid, regional, but broadly recognizable. Sanqing, the three pure ones, Yuanxi Tianzun, primordial, Lingbao Tianzun, numinous treasure, and Daodej Tianzun, the deified Laozi, Taishang Laojun, Jade Emperor as celestial administrator, Queen Mother of the West, Zhiwangmu, with peaches of longevity, Zhenwu, Zhuanwu, the perfected warrior of the north, the eight immortals, folk favorites, Lu Dongbin, Han Xiangzi, He Xianggu, and others. The kitchen god, Zhaojun, who ascends yearly to report household virtues and vices. Taoist religion here becomes a complete world. Cosmic offices mirror earthly ones. Ritual redresses imbalance. Myth teaches ethics. 7. Priests and monks. Two paths under one sky. 7.1 Zhengyi, Orthodox unity, and the Celestial Masters line. The Zhengyi tradition, rooted in the Celestial Masters, trained ritual specialists who married, lived among laity, and served local communities with registers, talismans, exorcisms, and jiao rites. Their historical seat is often associated with Mount Longhu in Jiangxi, where the Heavenly Master lineage continued across centuries. A Zhengyi priest looks more like a village pastor and healer than a cloistered monk, anchoring Daoism to households and markets. 7.2 Quanzhen, Complete Perfection, Monastic Reform. In the 12th century, amid war and social churn, Wang Chongyang founded Quanzhen. He promoted monastic celibacy and communal living, meditation, including Wang, ethical precepts, and internal alchemy, a synthesis of the three teachings, Confucian ethics, Buddhist meditation, Taoist cosmology. His disciples, the Seven Perfected, carried Quanzhen across North China. Qiu Chuji famously met Genghis Khan, counseling restraint. Later, the Longmen branch flourished. The White Cloud Temple, Baiyunguan, in Beijing, became a major seat. Quanzhen's monastic model offered Daoism a stable counterpart to Zhengyi's family priest paradigm. Together, they encompassed village rite and mountain cloister. 8. Techniques of the Way, Nourishing Life and Seeking Longevity. We'll explore these in depth in Part 2, but the map begins here. 8.1 Yangsheng, Nourishing Life. Taoists cultivated Yangsheng practices to nourish life. Breathwork, tuna, and guiding stretching, Daoyin, dietary regimens, seasonal living and herbs, sexual ethics and arts, Fangzhong, a spectrum from moderation to esoteric retention theories, Qigong, a modern umbrella term for older methods aligning breath, posture, and intention. The goal is harmony, not mere longevity, to ride the seasons inside the body as lightly as a leaf on a stream. 8.2 Alchemy, Outer and Inner. External alchemy, Waidan, experimented with minerals, notably cinnabar, mercury, to compound elixirs, sometimes yielding poison rather than immortality. Court chronicles tell of rulers sickened by pills that promised transcendence. Internal alchemy, Naidan, turn the crucible inward. Refine essence, Jing, into breath, Kuai. Breath into spirit, Shen. And spirit into void. Circulate the microcosmic orbit. Gestate an inner embryo of realized nature. Metaphors abound. Masters warned against forcing wu-wei even in alchemy. 8.3 Martial Echoes. Though Taijiquan and Wudang legends often wear Taoist robes, their histories braid multiple streams: military arts, village traditions, literati practice, later colored by Taoist cosmology. Whatever the precise genealogies, the ideal is consistent: softness over brute hardness, rooted balance over strain. 9. Daoism and the Fabric of Chinese Culture, a first look. A fuller story waits for part 2, but even now the outlines show poetry, Li Bai lifting cups among flowers, Wang Wei's mist and pines, Taoist images saturate Tang verse, painting, mountain water landscapes where empty space speaks. Humans are small, the way immense. Gardens, zigzag bridges that slow the body into attention. Windows framing fragments like living scrolls. Calligraphy and music, spontaneity honed by discipline until the stroke becomes breath. The Tao is not only thought or rite, it is a taste, simple, spare, generous. 10. Side by side, and sometimes at odds, Daoism, Buddhism, Confucianism. Again, we'll linger on this in part 2, but the three teachings long coexisted, competed, and cross-pollinated. Confucianism shaped ethics and governance. Buddhism brought monasticism, emptiness, and compassion. Taoism offered naturalness, ritual healing, and alchemical practice. A Chinese household might honor ancestors in Confucian rites, sponsor a Taoist jiao for community renewal, and chant Buddhist sutras for a departed grandmother. Far from hypocrisy, this was pragmatic complementarity, each tradition tending a different angle of the human. 11. How to hear a doctrine that doesn't argue. Taoism loves images because images trust experience. To close part 1, consider 3 that can guide even a 21st century listener. Water. It does not insist. It takes the low places people scorn, yet it wears down the hard. When tempted to force, ask, is there a softer path that still arrives? The uncarved block. Before branding, a thing has grain. Try doing one task today with fewer labels and more listening for the grain. The empty hub. A wheel turns because of the space in the middle. Leave room in calendars, in conversations. Usefulness leans on emptiness. These are not metaphors about religion. They are methods for living less violently. Interlude and invitation to part 2. Night thickens. A mountain path gleams white with limestone dust. A Taoist priest carries a bundle of talismans and a bell. Somewhere below, a Quanzhen monk sits in breath as cool as moonlight. Across a valley, a village prepares a jiao ritual. Paper bridges, lamps, drums. And in a city apartment, a designer reads the Daodejing and deletes 3 features from a bloated app. The way threads them all. In part 2, we'll dive deep into internal alchemy and nourishing life arts, walk the monasteries of Quanzhen and the village lanes of Zhengyi, watch Daoism spar and dance with Buddhism and Confucianism through the Tang and Song. See how Taoist ideas shaped medicine, feng shui, painting, poetry, and gardens. trace suppression and revival in the 20th century and the global spread of Qigong, Taiji, and Taoist ethics. Close with a field guide for living wu-wei today, leadership, ecology, and the courage of soft power. A river curls around a boulder it could never hope to move. Fog lifts, pine needles release last night's rain. A temple bell answers a dog's bark somewhere below. If part one traced Taoism's quiet grammar, the Laozi's water wisdom, the Zhuangzi's laughter, the first congregations that stitched villages with registers and rites, part two follows those currents downstream. Alchemy and longevity, monasteries and village priests, painters and physicians, suppression and revival, and the practical art of doing less so, the right thing can happen more. 12. Elixirs and inner embers, from Waidan to Naidan. 12.1 Gei Hong and the Alchemist's Dilemma. In the 4th century, the scholar official Gei Hong compiled the Bao Puzi, the master who embraces simplicity, a handbook for seekers of the extraordinary that reads today like a ledger of trial and error. He catalogued external alchemy, Waidan, heating minerals, especially cinnabar, mercury sulfide, with herbs in sealed furnaces to yield elixirs that promised light bones and long lives. Court chronicles across dynasties tell of men and emperors who ingested immortality and found poison, mercury madness, liver failure, sudden collapse. The caution did not kill the dream, it forced it inward. 12.2 Turning the Crucible Inside, Naidan. By the late first millennium, alchemists had reimagined the lab as body. The classics of internal alchemy, Naidan, teach a choreography of breath, attention, and subtle physiology. 3 treasures, Jing, essence, Qi, vital breath, Shen, spirit, are refined in sequence. Essence clarifies into breath, breath into spirit, spirit into void luminous awareness. The lower dantian, below the navel, is pictured as a furnace, the kidneys as watery mercury, the heart as fiery cinnabar, the spine a flue for circulating heat. Energy is guided along a microcosmic orbit, up the spine, down the front, smoothing blockages until circulation becomes effortless. Images are metaphors as much as maps. The best teachers warned against literalism and force. Lineages articulate the art in different idioms. The Zhonglu tradition, mythically traced to immortals Zhongli Quan and Lu Dongbin, couches instruction as mentor-student dialogue. The Southern school associated with Zhang Boduan's Wuzhenpian, Awakening to Reality, 11th century, writes in dense, rhymed riddles. Quanzhen masters such as Liu Yiming, 18th century, leave lucid commentaries that insist Naidan is a way of integrity before it is a technique. Without honesty, moderation, and kindness, the elixir curdles. 12.3 Nourishing Life, Yang Sheng. Beyond elixirs, Taoists developed Yang Sheng, nourishing life practices that prize harmony over heroics. Daoyin, guiding and stretching, sequences to unknot fascia and encourage breath. Tuna, breathing methods, lengthening exhale, gathering inhale, aligning with seasons. Diet and daily rhythm tuned to sunlight and climate. Sexual ethics and arts, Fangzhong, ranging from restraint to carefully framed reciprocity. Often misunderstood, their intent was to balance, not exploit. The medical sage Sun Simiao, 7th century, nicknamed King of Medicine, bridged Taoist sensibility and clinical craft. In On the Absolute Sincerity of Great Physicians, he wrote that a healer must treat rich and poor, friend and foe, alike, a Taoist compassion translated into practice. 12.4 The Body as Cosmos. Temple walls and hand scrolls sometimes display the Neijing Tu and Shuzhen Tu, anatomical landscapes where vertebrae are mountains, sinews are rivers, and deities dwell in organs. These diagrams remind practitioners that microcosm mirrors macrocosm. To calm one's breath is to make weather inside the skin. 13. Rites that stitch a village, priests, pantheons, and the Jiao. 13.1. Two tracks, one tradition. By the medieval period, Taoist service took two complementary forms. Zhuangzi, orthodox unity, heir to the celestial masters, trained ritual specialists who married, farmed, or worked and served their communities as exorcists, healers, and liturgists. Their headquarters long centered on Longhu Shan, Dragon Tiger Mountain, in Jiangxi, where the heavenly master lineage maintained registers and ordinations. Quanzhen, complete perfection, founded in the 12th century by Wang Chongyang, cultivated monastic celibacy, meditation, and internal alchemy. Quanzhen temples such as Baiyunguan, White Cloud Monastery, in Beijing became hubs for education and ordination. One could meet Daoism in a village lane, a priest burning talismans to pacify a fever, or in a mountain cloister where monks chanted liturgies in dawn's blue light. 13.2. The Jiao, renewing a world. A Jiao is a community renewal ceremony that might last days. Priests erect altars with banners and lamps. Petitions are inscribed to the celestial bureaucracy. Trumpets and drums sound like weather. Paper bridges span symbolic rivers so restless spirits may cross. The rite rebalances for a harvest, a plague, a drought, or a city's birthday. It is theology turned into architecture and sound. 13.3. The Pantheon and the Household. Taoism's pantheon is both bureaucratic and intimate. The three pure ones preside at the summit, with the Jade Emperor as administrator. Zhuangzi, the Queen Mother of the West, tends peaches of longevity on jade terraces. Zhenwu, the dark perfected lord, guards the north. The eight immortals wander between taverns and clouds. Kitchen god, Zhaojun, watches the stove and reports yearly on a family's conduct. Earth gods, Tudigong, and city gods, Cheng Huangye, link neighborhoods to the larger cosmos. Taoist ritual interweaves with folk practice and sometimes Buddhist liturgy, for example, during the lunar 7th month ghost festival, showing that Chinese religion at street level is braided rather than boxed. 14. Empire and the Wei, Tang favor, Song synthesis, Yuan patronage. 14.1. Tang, the Wei at court. The Tang imperial lineage bore the surname Li and claimed mythical kinship with Laozi. Tang emperors periodically canonized Laozi's text, granting it honorific titles. Xuanzong patronized Taoist rites and music at court. In 845, the Emperor Wuzong, anxious about foreign influence and eager for temple wealth, launched a persecution of Buddhism, closing monasteries and seizing lands. Daoism and Confucianism benefited institutionally, but the three traditions continued to interpenetrate in everyday life. 14.2. Song, three teachings, one conversation. The Song era, 960 to 1279, fostered a renaissance of philosophy and art. Neo-Confucian thinkers like Zhu Xi developed a cosmology of principle, lie, and material force, QI, that conversed with Taoist and Buddhist models. Quanzhen arose in the north, urging meditation, ethical discipline, and internal alchemy. Zhengyi priests in the south refined Jiao liturgies and talismanic arts. Painters put Taoist emptiness and mist on silk. Poets drank tea on terraces and called it the Wei. 14.3 Yuan, audience with a conqueror. In 1222, Chu Chuji, a principal disciple of Wang Chongyang, traveled across Central Asia to meet Genghis Khan. The aged monk counseled restraint and care for life. Genghis reportedly granted tax exemptions to Taoist sites. Under the Yuan Mongol dynasty, Quanzhen monasteries flourished. Zhengyi registers were recognized. Rivalries flickered. Sometimes Taoists and Buddhists competed for imperial favor, but the broader pattern remained: coexistence with jockeying. 14.4 Ming and Qing, Regulation and resilience. Later dynasties alternated patronage and control. Some emperors pursued elixirs to their detriment. Ming Jiajing was notorious for alchemical obsessions. Others enforced temple audits. Taoist lineages adapted, codifying ordinations, transmitting rituals in printed rubrics, and embedding themselves deeper in local society. 15. The brush and the breath. Daoism in the arts. 15.1 Mountains and water. Shanshui, mountain water. Painting, especially in the northern song, carries unmistakable Taoist DNA. Works by Fan Quan, travelers among mountains and streams, and Guoxi place humans as tiny guests under cliffs that breathe. Empty space is not lack. It is the way made visible, room for mist and meaning. Later masters Ma Yuan and Xiagui simplify forms further until a lone branch and a splash of ink can hold a winter. 15.2 Poetry and the Cup. The recluse Tao Qian, Yuan Ming, left office to return to fields and gardens, composing poems where chrysanthemums and wine attest a life less pushed. In the Tang, Li Bai rides moonlight across rivers. Romance, yes, but also a Taoist trust in spontaneity. 15.3 Gardens and the Engineered Natural. Classical Suzhou gardens choreograph crooked paths, borrowed scenery, Daodejing, and Taihu stones so that each step is a framed surprise. Pavilions bear names from the Zhuangzi: water, rock, plant, and pavilion turn philosophical into habitable. 15.4 Qin and calligraphy. The seven-string guqin, instrument of sages, invites listening to quiet. Pieces like Flowing Water or Three Variations on Plum Blossom teach attention that does not seize. Calligraphy, brush, ink, paper, enacts wu-wei. The stroke is both discipline and release. Too tight, it dies. Too lax, it spills. The middle way leaves a line that breathes. 16. Medicine, Feng Shui, and the ecology of restraint. 16.1 Medicine's Classic. The Huangdi Neijing, Yellow Emperor's Inner Canon, a composite from early centuries BCE-CE, systematized meridians, acupuncture points, pulse diagnosis, and seasonal regimen in a cosmology of yin-yang and 5 phases. Though not Taoist scripture, its assumptions, balance, interdependence, timing mesh with Taoist sensibility. Physicians like Sun Simiao and later compilers integrated herbal pharmacopoeias with ethical vows. 16.2 Dwelling with the Land. Feng Shui, wind water, art listens to terrain, mountain backs, water mouths, dragon veins, seeking sightings that flow. Whether sighting a village, a grave, or a doorway, the principle remains: work with rather than against contours. Modern planners may debate old rules, but the core insight, design that respects forces larger than the plan, still instructs. 16.3 Wu-wei as environmental ethic. The Laozi's doing without overdoing reads today like policy advice. Restore wetlands rather than build bigger levees. Rewild hillsides instead of repeatedly terracing. Practice small corrections early in water and soil management. In a century of climate stress, soft power, planting mangroves, removing dams, letting rivers meander, often outperforms hard walls. 17. Upheaval and return. Daoism in the modern era. 17.1 Late Qing and Republican campaigns. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, reformers attacked superstition. Urban temples were secularized into schools or offices. Spirit medium cults were policed. Priestly lineages adjusted by streamlining rites and emphasizing ethics and public service. 17.2 1949 and after. Suppression, survival, revival. After 1949, religious institutions came under state control. The China Taoist Association was established 1957 to liaise with authorities. The Cultural Revolution 1966 to 76 shattered statues and monasteries. Many priests and monks hid or ceased practice. With reform and opening, post-1978, limited revival began. Baiyunguan reopened, ordinations resumed, mountains like Wudang and Longhu were restored. Taoist music and rituals entered intangible cultural heritage programs. Temples regrew gardens. Local communities relearned Jiao. Meanwhile, across the strait, Taiwan saw continuous Zhengyi practice and exuberant temple culture, elaborate processions, charitable associations, and priestly ordinations. Hong Kong and overseas Chinese communities sustained lineages through urban temples and ancestral halls. 17.3 Qigong fever and global breath. From the 1950s and especially the 1980s, Qigong, an umbrella for breath movement practices, spread from parks to stadiums. Some groups drifted toward mass movements and met political headwinds. Others remained clinical or recreational. Beyond China, Taijiquan, with roots in Chen and Yang families, and allied arts, Bagua, Xingyi, took hold in community centers and clinics from Sao Paulo to Stockholm. Much of this wave presented itself as health practice, not religion, yet it carried Taoist metaphors of flow and softness into global culture. 17.4 Acupuncture and the Clinic. Acupuncture and herbal medicine migrated into Western hospitals and private practices. Research explored mechanisms from endorphin release to fascia dynamics. Results vary by condition, but the broader shift is clear. A Taoist-tinged ecology of care has entered the world's medical conversation. 18. The Way Leaves Asia. Translators, Teachers, and Pop Culture. 18.1. The Bookshelf of the Way. Over the last century, translators and scholars, D.C. Lau, Burton Watson, Ames and Hall, Roger Ames and David Hall, Arthur Waley, Red Pine, Bill Porter, and many more, made the Laozi and Zhuangzi available in dozens of voices, highlighting process philosophy, ritual context, or poetic force. Interpretations differ, and that is fitting. The texts invite multiple angles. 18.2. Teachers in Parks and Monasteries. Monastics from Quanzhen and priests from Zhengyi travel to teach. Lay teachers offer Qigong and Taiji. Taoist studies programs sprout in universities. Some lineages maintain formal ordination. Others share practices without membership. Caution matters. Not everything branded Taoist is anchored in lineage or ethics, but the spread has opened curiosity rather than closed it. 18.3. The Way on the Screen and the Risk of Caricature. Cinema filled with Wudang peaks and sword flight. Legends of Zhang Sanfeng, the imagined founder of Taiji, enchant, though historians remind us the boxing's demonstrable roots lie with Chen village. Pop culture magnifies magic. Taoists themselves often return to quiet practice, breath, brush, garden, rite. 19. A Field Guide to Wu-wei. Now, leadership, work, and ecology. You don't need a temple bell to practice Taoist sense. You need attention and restraint. 19.1. For leaders. Set less, see more. Cut 3 initiatives. Put slack back into the calendar. The empty hub lets the wheel turn. Nudge, don't shove. Change incentives and frictions so the desired behavior is the path of least resistance. Stop signaling. Start listening. Leave room for bottom-up intelligence. Outcomes improve when you stop over-managing. Practice the 3 treasures: compassion in policy design, frugality in resource use, humility about what you can predict. 19.2. For makers. Follow the grain. When code, clay, or copy resists, step back. Let material properties guide choices. Use the useless. Keep space on the page. silence in the score, margin in the sprint. Emptiness is a feature, not a bug. Cook. Ding your craft. Repetition with awareness ripens into effortlessness. Don't force the joint that isn't there. 19.3. For citizens and cities. Plant soft power. Trees in schoolyards, bioswales, daylighted streams. Little water things that add up. Design for walking. Curved paths, shaded benches, small surprises. A Taoist city invites meandering attention, not just throughput. Eat with seasons, sleep with dark. Vote for slack in systems so they flex before they break. 19.4. For the self you keep meeting. 5 minutes of Zhuangzi. Sit and forget the to-do. Feel the breath like a river under ribs. One act of non-forcing. In the next argument, ask one question instead of offering a fix. 10. The kitchen god. Treat the ordinary center of home, stove, sink, table, as an altar to attention. 20. Misunderstandings to lay down gently. Daoism is quietism. It can counsel withdrawal from vanity, but it also built public rituals, advised emperors, and healed villages. It prefers right amount, not zero. Qigong is automatically Taoist. Much isn't. Some is medical, some martial, some new religious. Taoist values, ethics, humility, lineage are the test. Wu-wei means do nothing. It means don't overdo. Shape with the grain, pause before push. Water arrives, just not by ramming. Yin is bad, yang is good. Both are necessary. The disease is in stagnation or excess, not in one pole. 21. Epilogue. The river's logic. Dusk on Wudang. Bats stitch the first stars. A priest folds talismans into a wooden box and blows out a lamp. In Beijing, an office worker copies a single Laozi line on a sticky note and closes 2 browser tabs. In a Fujian village, a Zhengyi master checks the moon's phase before starting a rite. In Vancouver, an octogenarian finishes a slow set of taiji and smiles at the wind. None of them is trying to conquer anything. All are looking for the angle where things want to go. Taoism survived because its core wager is small and durable. The way already moves. We can fight it, or we can feel for the current and let it carry us around a rock we cannot budge. Sometimes that looks like governance with a lighter touch, sometimes like a hand that loosens its grip on a problem long enough to notice a better lever, sometimes like a community feeding ghosts so the living can sleep, sometimes like a body that remembers how to breathe below the clavicles. The Laozi and Zhuangzi are not manuals of escape, they are manuals of gentler contact. They do not promise that life will stop changing, they promise that we can change more gracefully with it. They do not abolish grief. They show how grief can flow rather than harden. They do not crown the clever. They ask the clever to unlearn just enough to see what the uncarved block still knows. So if you need a practice to take away, take one easy thing. Leave a little space. In a meeting, on a shelf, in a sentence, in a river's floodplain. The wheel will thank you. The city will breathe. You will remember the sound a pine makes when it is not forced to be anything but a pine. The stream slips by the rock, and in the long arithmetic of water, the rock is the one that moves.